Hello everyone, my name is Piotr Tomiak and I'm senior software developer at JetBrains. I work on WebStorm product and my main responsibilities are Vue and Angular plugins. Since I wrote my first program in Turbo Pascal, I don't know if anyone recalls this thing, I was always fascinated by IDEs, by tooling, how this works, how to make it work better. And with coming of Delphi, I actually started writing my first plugins for the IDEs. And this has been a pretty interesting adventure for the last 10 years. And I want to share a little bit with you how it works from the other side, from the side of the people who do tooling, on an example of Vue. It's going to be just an example. A lot of this applies to general language support, to Angular, Typescript, and other things. And what you can see, how many of you know about Vue? I don't know if... okay. So basically Vue is the framework where you, where you get templates. You can create some dynamic content. You have directives which modify the content of the elements. You have components. You have filters in the expressions, and a lot of other things. So basically, what you see there is a goal which we wanted to reach as an IDE developers, right? That you get the list of directives, you get the list of modifiers on the directive, you get documentation alongside, you get expressions and things like that. What it takes to do language support in a text editor, in IDE. First of all, I think the most important thing is syntax highlighting, okay? So this is something which you get in Notepad++, for instance. And it's really cool because it helps you understand the code better, and it helps you to quickly navigate to interesting parts of the code. Then you want code formatting because you want your code to be nicely readable, and everyone should use the same formatter within the team. And the next step is more advanced, where we need to start providing more stuff. So it's completion, documentation, inspections, and refactoring. And at the beginning, I would like to say a little bit about the first problem, the syntax highlighting. This is something which requires the text editor to know only about the particular file. So we don't have to look at another files in the project. We have a single file. We tokenize it. This can be done through the state machine or through the regular expressions. For instance, TextMate, which is used in VS Code, is using regular expressions to tokenize the file. And once we have it tokenized, which means we kind of form more understandable to the analyzing engine, the text we convert to something more understandable, then we can connect that with colors. And that's how you get, for instance, this V4 being highlighted. So this is the basic syntax highlighting. And then you can also get semantic highlighting, which means that we also try to figure out what a particular symbol means. So, for instance, here you have a name, which is a local variable, and you should know that this is, it helps that this is a local variable. Then you have chart settings, which is colored differently, because it's a property of a component. It's of a Vue component, and it's also colored differently. So this requires much better understanding of the project, and here is where building the model of the project comes in. And it's pretty difficult task to do that. And doing this just for syntax highlighting would be kind of pointless. So the model is actually needed in code completion, documentation, inspections, and refactorings. And I want to focus on building view model now. But a lot of these concepts apply to other types of frameworks or languages. So for instance, Vue is really complex when it comes to building the model, okay? You have those mixins, which are wonderful, powerful things which can nest and recur, which can be recursive mixins, and they contribute properties, they contribute components. It's a really hard task to analyze such a models once you build it. But still, once you build the model, you can do a lot of interesting stuff with it. And usually the model, when you perform a static analysis of the code, is different than what you get in the runtime. In the runtime, you don't have those standalone components. Those are the components which are not really included in application, but we need to know about them to provide code completion and auto-import for them. But they're not registered globally, or they're not present in any application. Or plugins, there is not really a concept of plugin within the Vue runtime. So it requires a good understanding of what the framework does, and also how to analyze the source code. And once we have the good model, then we can do some really cool stuff, like propose filters from mixins, application scope, global scope from libraries, which improve productivity. So this is an example of mixin declaration for those who are not familiar with Vue. Basically, this is a registration of global Vue mixin, which mixins contributes filter, a global mixin filter, and also has within a recursive reference to a recursive mixin, which also contributes the recursive mixin filter. So once we have the model, we can do a lot of cool stuff, but we have to first build the model, and for that we have to analyze the source code. Okay, and there are several ways to do it. For instance, Typescript language services parses all the files and keeps them in the memory, and based on the memory contents provides all the resolves types and things like that. But having a very large source code of different languages, there is another approach where you index the source files. So you parse the files, you put them through kind of an analyzing algorithm, which creates stubs, shortcut versions of files where you exclude the algorithm or any logic, and then you store them in various indexes, which are quickly accessible when needed. So, for instance, the same process applies to Java files, to HTML files, TypeScript files, and basically all the files in the project. And we also try to do our best to skip irrelevant library files, because like if you try to index whole node modules folder, it can take, I don't know, 2 hours maybe, or 3, to browse, to parse all the JavaScript files. So it has to be also smart, sorry. And I think the very interesting part about the platform of the IntelliJ platform is that we create stubs. So this is kind of a shorter version of the tree. Like on the left, you have the abstract syntactic tree of the file. So once you tokenize it, then you parse it and you build this tree. It takes a lot of time to parse, right? Because you have to first tokenize, you have to read the file. Files are large, can be large. And then you have to tokenize them, and you have to build parser tree. So what we do is we create kind of a shorter structure where we keep only the interesting parts of the AST, and we save it in the binary format. So it's immediately accessible when needed through indexes. This saves a lot of time when there is a query to provide, for instance, content assist for filters. And this is basically it. So once we have, for instance, something like mixin, Vue mixin, we store it in the mixins index, and then when we analyze the model, we find all the places where mixins are being created. Same with filters. But there is a lot of trouble with analyzing of libraries, because libraries are transpiled. You have probably usually around 4 or 5 sets of the same source code in the library in transpiled form to ES5, to ES6, to common JS modules. You have DTS files, you have a regular source. Sometimes it's JavaScript, sometimes it's Typescript. Often it's without documentation and things like that. So if we would be applying the same, we were actually applying the same static analysis as with user source code to libraries, but that was a huge fail because we were missing a lot of components, we were missing a lot of things. So then we figure out, okay, so let's run the library in node process. Let's just run, I don't know, Vuetify library, see what happens to the Vue instance, and extract components from there and directives. This was really nice, but first of all, you wouldn't like to run such a code on user machine because it can crash, it will occupy memory, it will be slow, okay? So maybe run it on our server, save it for a version of the library. And it was pretty okay idea, but not everything is available at the runtime from the instance of Vue. So for instance, you can't really see what events will component emit, because this is in the code. It's not a structured library like Angular, where you have to specify and annotate that this is an output and it will emit events. And it's the same with slots. You can't actually get the slots from the runtime. So maybe do some run and then combine it with static analysis to extract information about events and slots. And we actually have the generator for it. It works. It grabs maybe 60–70% of events and slots. It's pretty okay. But it doesn't have documentation. So if you use Vuetify and you hover over component, you probably would like to have documentation, because then you don't have to go to the web page. So this was also fail. Then we looked at TypeScript definitions files, and is anyone not aware what TypeScript definition file is? Okay, so that's good. That's great. So basically, it allows to treat the library as a black box, okay? And this is a concept we really liked. You can include documentation there. You can include basically all the information about JavaScript source code within a single set of files, okay? It's not a single file, but it's a set of files which are quickly to parse, quickly to analyze. No logic, there are short files, it's really cool. And then also we have a community which is creating typings for libraries which are not shipping their own DTS files. So this is also like you basically this is so great that basically TypeScript language services are right now can provide you with code completion in pure JavaScript based on the DTS files of the libraries you're using, right? So it's really helping everyone to just write code faster. So we thought, okay, so this is something we would like to have, some similar things, like, I don't know, view types, web types, I don't know, something like that, right? So we looked around for other solutions, and the first thing was to look at our competition, at the VS Code Vtour. And I was actually quite surprised because the metadata there only includes tags, attributes, descriptions, and types. There is no events, there is no slots, information, and information about directives. So we had to look somewhere else. And we found out that a lot of libraries are actually shipping some API JSON files with them. Like Quasar is shipping a JSON file which describes the component. And apparently every library was doing it on their own. So we will have to do a lot of adapters to kind of consume those APIs. There are some tools which help you extract the information, like ViewDoc parser. And again, it has its own format. I don't think the schema is available. And also, those files are just single per component per directive. And there is also a proposition for standard from Vitur, the maintainer, called Webtypes. And it looked pretty interesting. It was incomplete, and there was not much interest from the community onto this. So in such situation, what you do, you create your own standard, right? Because your own standard will be better. And we're sure it is. If you set a good goal. So we want a standard to be open source so that everyone can contribute, and finally the community can actually really contribute to it. It should be inclusive. So if we do a standard which is specific to our product, no one will actually contribute to it because it's specific to our product, right? And that's what we would like to avoid, just to create something what Typescript did with Typescript definitions files. So it should work for linters, right? We don't have much linters for HTML, and sometimes it's quite troublesome to find out that you misspelled directive in the runtime after 30 seconds of running the program. Or to create documentation. So this format could be an intermediate format between the source code and the documentation portal from which you generate, or the documentation generate could create a metadata from our format. And it should not only focus on Vue. There are a lot of other web frameworks like web components. There is CSS. There is a lot of other things which contribute to your template, to what is happening in your template. And of course, easy to create, up to date. So we came with something called Webtypes. This is actually right now it's supported by several Vue libraries. I'll come to that later. And it's a JSON file which specifies all the contributions library to have to a particular web framework. For now, if we're focusing on Vue, so just to have like a seed, something where we can improve the standard and then expand with support. And by standard and support, I mean support by the standard, not support within our IDE. IDE supports less than the standard can specify. And we have something like library typings available on Webtypes namespace, similarly to types namespace. And what is really interesting is that once we released the first early access with this, we immediately got requests from users to support Webtypes for local development. And this was really nice and surprising because it actually helps when you develop your own components locally because you get documentation within the HTML editor, right? You can ship Webtypes with your private libraries, so it doesn't have to be something public on NPM. And there is also schema available on Schema Store. So in editors like VS Code or Webtypes, you can automatically, you can start, you have support for the schema if you create Webtypes JSON file without finding the schema reference. And right now, Webtypes are being bundled with Bootstrap Vue, Quasar, and Vuetify. Bootstrap Vue has the best support there. Documentation, URL links. You can see the documentation for Be Alert component, which is really rich in description in all the things. You can see the slot, which is provided by the component. And for Vue library itself, we're also publishing Webtypes to the namespace because it's not yet bundled with. I hope not yet. I hope it's going to be bundled at some point with Vue library itself, and it actually encompasses all the documentation for Vue components. So for Vue directives and components which are embedded. And as you could see a little bit there, the standard itself supports HTML, Markdown, and plain text documentation markup. You can specify the navigation to the source code, and you can specify types for instance, inputs, outputs, events in Typescript. And as if it is required, we can contribute also JSDoc there or other type syntaxes. Depending on the languages. And of course, the standard supports components directive filters along with their so-called properties and attributes of those entities. And our plan for the future, as far as standard is concerned, is to add support for mixins. It wasn't required so far. There is not many mixins like happening, being contributed within the libraries so far, and we really want to add CSS support. So, for instance, if you have Ionic icons, like icons library, and you specify icons through CSS property, then it would be really cool to have a documentation where you have a preview of the icon, right? So this is something we want to add to the standard so that the 10 IDEs can support it, and also regular HTML attributes and support for web components. And having spoken of all of this, this is the moment where this is the thing where you can get really involved, and we would really like to have community involved into web standards because we see it as an opportunity for basically everyone using right now Vue and other frameworks to have something which standardize what's happening in the HTML templates. You can contribute web types if you're a Vue developer. You can contribute web types for your favorite library, either on the Webtypes namespace. You need to contribute then to our Webtypes repo, or you can actually create a PR to bundle web types with the library, and this is actually preferable because then the web types are always up to date. And this is what we cooperated with Vuetify, Bootstrap Vue, and Quasar to happen. And we plan to create such PRs for other libraries like Element UI. But there are a lot of small libraries which we will not be able to contribute to anytime. You can also add support for your favorite documentation generator, so that if you write your source code, you write your local program, it can actually create web types for you from your source code, and then you get a really nice support in your text editor. And we would welcome any PRs to improve web type schema. And with that, I would finish my talk. Thank you very much. And
Thank
do you
you.
have any?
Bravo, bravo. I'm here at your service. If anyone has any question, where can they find you?
One there.
I do too.
I get a question. How do you convince me to switch from Visual Studio Code to WebStorm?
I don't have to. And basically, this was not the point of this presentation, because the web types are actually something we want to. I think there are things where from which everyone benefits. So I think from something like web types, we all benefit: VS Code, WebStorm, and developers. And actually, it would be pretty cool if VS Code starts to support that, because then we also will get more community, and everyone would be happy.
Good answer. You don't have to. I love it. Okay. Any other questions? I can kind of see from here. Other side? Right there in the middle. 1 second. Here you go.
My question is, because I'm using IntelliJ and developing in TypeScript, JavaScript, because Java is as well developed by our team, and I don't have a license on WebStorm. Is it the same plugin for the Vue.js? Because I see that not very useful, maybe in IntelliJ. It doesn't work like I would expect. Is that the same plugin?
Okay,
and
so
there is a difference between
this is the same plugin, and what I'm showing you is something we have. The support for Webtypes and things like that has been released only like 2 weeks ago. So this is something very fresh. So if you're using IntelliJ 2019.2, you'll be having only part of it. Yes. So when it comes to plugins which are included in WebStorms, everything is actually included in other IDEs: PyCharm, PHP Storm, IntelliJ. Thank you. Yes, you can already have it.
Okay, I think that's probably enough time for questions.
No
Thank
questions
you.
about Webtypes?
Are you going to be here later? Are you going to stay for a while?
We actually have a booth downstairs.
They have a booth downstairs.
So I will be happy to answer any questions around Webtypes or other things as well.
Good solution. Thank you again very much, Piotr.
Thank you very much.